we have a quorum. Welcome to the Monday, August 6th Rules Committee meeting. The first item we have is citizen comment, and we have about 12 people on the list. So first is someone called Advocates for Action. Do we have someone who's representing that group? Ah, okay.
And we're all not speaking. Okay. Let's reassemble ourselves. Good evening.
Good evening.
This is just a few of us. I'm here with Evanston Cradle to Career and the Advocates for Action, which is a community leadership council, newly established. And we are here tonight because one of the aldermen has really come and stepped up and helped change the narrative for one of our advocates. We represent all different races, cultures, beliefs. We have unemployed, underemployed, executive directors, the whole thing. We represent the community. And one of our advocates was having some issues, some real crisis things going on. Alderman came and really stepped up, and we really wanted to publicly thank her tonight for all of her help, for her activism. We are in awe, and we are very grateful to Alderman Rainey. And we're going to give everybody a card just to kind of see who we are. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Thank you,
Yes.
ma'am, very, very much.
Alderman Rainey?
You know, it's the phrase "it takes a village" from our very dear friend, Mrs. Clinton. This was an effort that all I did was steer the boat. Believe me, one of the great things about being an alderman in the city of Evanston is you can get things done. You don't have to know anything. You just have to know who can do things that you need to get done. And in this case, the city of Evanston, I am telling you, Cradle to Career wrote a very big check. Housing Opportunities for Women stepped up to the plate with a major donor that made things happen. I just happened to know the route. I had a car. I could drive to each place and make an appeal. That's really all I did. I just knew where to go to find the answers. So this really belongs to everybody and to the people who introduced me to the problem. So, well, there's nothing I like better than flowers, but, and these people who were here, and, you know, the need was so tremendous that I was with Alderman Holmes the night we found out about this need, and we just said together, this need is not going to go unmet. And, you know, you just zero in on one problem, and given this kind of city we have, there's no way we couldn't solve that problem, right? And there she is, yeah. So
Thank you.
That's what happened, just so you know the real truth.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we have Junad Risky.
I think we need to stop pretending citizens are uncivil. And when we keep coming to meetings, and really we keep on hearing things that are just fabrications all the time, it's not a difference of an opinion. It's basically making statements that are inaccurate, completely inaccurate, with no basis in reality. Such as the city manager claimed he could build Robert Crown at no cost to taxpayers. Then spending taxpayer money to tell us it was a mistake, basically, and now it's going to cost us millions of dollars. And as a citizen, when you hear things like that and you even hear them in the beginning, you realize there's something wrong. Mistakes are quite reasonable. I had a city employee come to my house to change out the water meter. As he changed it out, he looked at me and said, I put it in backwards. That's a mistake. He admitted it, and he fixed it. In 5 minutes, 10 minutes, he turned it around. That's a real mistake. But telling me something's going to be built for free that costs millions of dollars when you're supposedly a professional, is that a mistake? Well, I'm sorry. And now tonight, we're talking about limiting public comment, or basically allowing the mayor to select who can speak and who can't speak. Well, if the alderman can't see a pitfall in that, I would think it's a big pitfall. Is the mayor just going to let his friends speak? Are you going to limit poor people to speak? Are you going to limit black people to speak and others? You're the one that selects, so what is your criteria? So that is a problem. If you want to do it, but I think that's a problem. And I think, will we have a say in the city manager's evaluation? We'll soon, I suppose we'll have to see about that. I think some of you think the city manager's done an outstanding job. Well, some of us don't quite think that, unfortunately. You know, some of you, those of you who keep claiming we have no money for Harley Clark, when at every meeting we continue to spend money very foolishly and waste money and do many things that are wrong, that's uncivil to me. Very uncivil. Fountain Square? I mean, aren't any of you embarrassed at $7 million? The pipes are broken, doesn't work, months behind. I mean, what are the excuses there? We hear excuses, of course. We haven't had a report on this. We don't know what's going on. We have a lot of hearsay, but it's months late. And the real question is, you know, you're worried about the maintenance of Harley Clark. Well, this thing is going to be a maintenance nightmare for years to come, it looks like to me. And there'll be maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars spent to straighten it out. So I think we have a lot of problems here. And frankly, I realize some of the council members are very frustrated because the public is very angry. And the public's angry for a lot of reasons. And at Human Services, I'll say more problems that I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to run out of time. But I would tell you, to limit public speaking, to make mistakes, and keep on misusing our money is not good. I think we demand honest work, and we want the truth spoken. Thank you.
Next is Dorothy Head.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dorothy Head. I live at 1823 Laurel Avenue and have been since May 1975. I came here tonight to let you know that I support Dr. Effie's initiative that equity in business be the main focus of her work at this time, to help ensure that we don't have a repeat of past decisions made by the council, like the placement of the waste transfer station and the pumping station in the same general area, without thinking about the long-term effects on the neighborhood. Who would have thought years ago that a business like the waste transfer station would be having the negative impact it is now having, and who knows what will happen when the pumping station is built less than a mile away? What effect will it have? I strongly urge you, the council, to fully support these efforts so that the necessary steps can be implemented to make this a reality and not placed on the city's bucket list. I thank you for listening and look forward to your cooperation.
Thank you. Janet Alexander Davis. Then after Ms. Davis is Jeff Smith, and then Mike Vasilko.
Evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Janet Alexander Davis. I live in the 5th Ward. Let me just say to you guys, thank you for your service. Thank you for your time. Thank you so very much. We hear a lot up here, and sometimes things are so one-sided that it even bothers me at home. And I think I realized none of what I'm saying was what I was going to say, but that it seems that when you're on the other side of the diocese, your perspective changes. And because I was in management for some years, I understand my employees might not have understood all of it, as we don't understand all of what you know, and the decisions that you make sometimes you're criticized for, but it's because we really don't have the full picture all the time. I am here to say that when I first heard about the equity and empowerment job and that someone would be hired for that, and I know Dr. Effiam through somebody else and thought that was a perfect choice. I was so happy that you wanted to look at your administration of this building, of the city, in a way that was equal and full of empowerment. I'm hoping that that really is what's going to happen. I'm hoping that that's what the job description is. I'm not sure. But my experience in this town, being someone that's been active since the 1960s in the best way that I could, it matters that we have some rules that understand what the citizens are trying to say to you. And when some of the decisions were made, when the waste transfer station deal was made, and we had just a few days, it felt like, to be able to mount a response and say we should have been able to have something to do with the host agreement. And we're being affected now in the community as a result of that, because we weren't able to be at the table to suggest certain things. And I'm saying that the waste transfer station, they let go one of Michael, who was the manager for a long time. And what I understand after that, garbage was flying all up and down the street. And so, things, we are affected every day. So I'm hoping that the equity and empowerment means what you're saying it's going to mean, that we're going to look at how we do business in different neighborhoods. I'm concerned about the Fifth Ward, as so many others are concerned, that we not get a look by the city as we may look at the downtown. So I support Dr. Effiam. I support the city and your decision to look at yourself in an equal and an empowerment kind of way for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Smith?
Thank you. Jeff Smith, 2724 Harrison. I hope you'll forgive me for a citizen comment about citizen comment, but this is item 8 on the agenda. And if I was on your side of the dais, to which I aspired at one point, I would be interested in getting home at a decent hour of the evening, and I'd prefer fewer comments of greater quality and less repetition. For that reason, I would oppose a ban on seating time, and I probably encourage it. The U.S. Senate is considered one of the more civil debating societies in the parliamentary world, and they've had rules like that for well over a century. And I've heard some comments made from the dais that some speakers are perhaps not representative of others out in a silent majority of a community. If somebody is getting time ceded to them, that is itself evidence that they are, in fact, representative of other voices and may in fact be leaders, and perhaps our ears ought to perk up when that happens. I'd also observe that anything that the city does that has the appearance of trying to reduce citizen input is probably as unproductive as some of the behavior that frankly makes me wince on both sides of the dais. We need to have a discussion that indicates a willingness to hear and to listen. And it's also ironic that the greater the public interest in an issue, the less anyone's allowed to say about it. I'd consider having separate forums, setting aside a Saturday morning when we know there's going to be a hot button heater issue, so that people can all hear each other's points of view without being rushed into a few seconds of compression. The last time I served in government was during the fracking debate in Illinois, and there was some pretty rough stuff. People in my department were accused of being in the pocket of big oil or of trying to ruin people's farms or livelihood. People were told they should be fired. We got hate mail saying that people should die of cancer. It was pretty rough. But you got to learn to take it. If you don't want to do that, then people shouldn't be in government. I believe, and I'll go to my grave believing, it's the right of Americans to get ticked off and to yell at government, but it's rarely the place of government to respond in kind. I trust you guys to make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Vasilko?
Thank you. Mike Vasilko, 2728 Reese. I'm here tonight to just comment and address an issue that I heard about at a recent council meeting regarding civility. First of all, for years I've recommended that the council suspend their meetings at a certain reasonable hour and not drag meetings on into the long hours of the night and into the next morning. I think that goes without saying. That's, first of all, it's not healthy for you, but you don't get paid to do that kind of late hour work. I don't know if there's a reason why you can't just simply suspend a meeting and carry on that business at the next council meeting, but you probably should consider it. I also don't feel, though, however, that there should not be a censure of any one alderman when there's been a historical precedent for other aldermen setting the bar for civility very, very low. So I think, I'm not speaking necessarily in support of a ban on any kind of words, because some words, the words used actually are, you'll find them in a dictionary and you'll find them to be reasonable expressions of anger, contempt, and disgust. And that, I think, is how those words were being used. But regardless, there should be no censure of any alderman who's speaking on behalf of his citizens, his constituents, who are very frustrated. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mario Vela?
I'm sorry, I thought that was the Senator.
Okay, thank you. And then Alejandra Ibanez? Okay. All right. I thought so. Misty Wittenberg?
I'm over here. Here, come here. So, Misty Wittenberg and Elodie Wittenberg. I'm here to speak primarily in opposition. It was referenced at the last meeting. Come here. About changing the city clerk's position from an elected one to an appointed one. I oppose it for the same reasons that were given to support it, because the clerk doesn't report to another city authority. So it's the only full-time city position that doesn't report primarily to the city as a corporation instead of to the city's public interest. And the clerk's position is not just a file. The clerk is also the public's FOIA officer and election officer. So I'm wondering how the council can genuinely say that removing this tiny parcel of independence we have could be for the public benefits, especially financial benefit, when earlier this year, council approved paying more than $45,000 to an alderman, who was specified by name to receive the money. And in total, the council approved almost $84,000 of that public money that was supposed to go to low to moderate income residents, to privately compensate just one single city official. Great. Especially when officials are legally prohibited from acquiring financial interest, let alone 40 to 70% of a grant. And we don't know where else this is happening because the city won't implement independent oversight or audits. And the city has repeatedly subverted the existing laws we have and procedures that prevent this. So why are we paying hundreds of thousands of grant dollars to the private employers of our city officials who aren't otherwise eligible for that funding? And what was the point of re-upping those grants when the city's own report stated that 0 of the 40 projected jobs were created or retained with this funding? Thank you. When city officials are legally prohibited from using city facilities for non-city use, why have we for years now been allowing city officials to use city facilities rent-free for non-city, non-civic purposes for programs they're being paid to administer, and which also prohibitively they've been charging fees for residents who attend? Why are city officials who have financial interest in a grant and legally prohibited from exercising any functions or responsibilities for that grant program allowed to join every committee governing that grant program? Why are they then allowed to use those committee and council positions to consult for and vote on items that steer business to their employer? Why, when prohibited by both city contract and federal law, are we allowing city officials to evaluate their own contract performance compliance for grants in which they have a financial interest? And whose job is it to follow up on that compliance documentation when the city's being charged and paying twice the allowable disbursements?
Ms. Wittenberg, 10 seconds.
Thank you. So basically what I'm saying here, and I can go on, but how can oversight work if the people who are being overseen are the ones
Time is up.
adjudicating when they
Thank
break
you.
the law and determining their own consequences? What's the point of
your time is up.
transparency if there's no
Ms. Wittenberg,
accountability to go with
thank
it?
you. Lori Keenan, and then Ally Harned.
My name is Laura Keenan. I live in the 7th Ward. I'm here tonight to speak about something that happened at the July 23rd City Council meeting when Mayor Pro Tem Alderman Judy Fisk prevented me from speaking, saying that it was a rule that people could not see their time, when in fact, previously at that same meeting, time had been ceded. In fact, tonight, you will be voting on that rule, which did not exist at that meeting. I believe that censoring and limiting public comment by an individual and a citizen is wrong. It was wrong at that meeting, and I believe strongly that it could have disaffected the outcome of that meeting. I'm not sure what you'll do tonight in making that rule, but I'd like to address the fact that the rule did not exist at the July 23rd meeting, and I'd like some sort of consideration about what you'll do, because I believe the outcome of that meeting was definitely changed. Thank you.
Ally Harned. And then after Ally Harned is Sheila Mary and Ray Friedman.
I'm back, and I brought my sidekick. Good evening, Honorable Rules Committee. I came here tonight to address a couple of things that I saw on the Rules Committee agenda. Civility and seating time. As I've been saying, I'm sort of new to paying attention to city government, and it's fascinating. One thing that I didn't get to say last week about the referendum signers when they were gathering petitions for those 10 crazy days is that I've heard comments from the dais and in social media. While it is true that supporters of demolition could also sign the petition, we overwhelmingly found that someone was, if they were not in favor of preservation, they elected not to sign. We had wonderful conversations, great stories, and personally I felt really energized by this very pure exercise in democracy. I received official notice today that there is an objection to the referendum question, so I look forward to the public hearing on this on Thursday, August 9th at 2:30. I invite people who have an opinion about the referendum question to attend. It's a public hearing. I spoke last week about my suggestion to introduce restorative practices into government practices, and I've received a lot of positive feedback from the idea. So I know that there are practitioners in the city who are really interested and ready to help out with whatever may be needed to start to heal the divides in this city. I believe good government includes the ability to disagree about something without shaming language, gestures, or actions. At the school where I work, we practice own it, fix it, learn from it, and move on. This works really well for kids, and it can work well for grown-ups as well. Do you need the magic hand? No, not right now. Okay. I would love to see this happen in the city of Evanston. We, the people, want our voices to be heard, and we have the right to it. In fact, I was super interested to find the government organization chart on the City of Evanston website, magic hand, buddy, which puts the residents at the top. As an elected official, I hope and trust that that's always in the forefront of everybody's thinking. We should be able to speak. We should be able to cede our time. We should be allowed to have feelings and emotions about issues that are important to us, and we should not expect scolding or shushing or respectful dialogue. I do believe that it goes both ways, and I intend to continue striving to have respectful dialogue with everyone in this city. A couple of other ideas that have come to me as I've spent time watching meetings, hours on YouTube, really exciting stuff. When you do figure out how much time to allow us, the people, to speak, magic hand, buddy. Let's make an effort to be equitable in how time is allotted, and how people are cut off. I've noticed during the meetings that some people are cut off pretty sternly while others are allowed to go on. I took advantage of that one once I know. Oh, yeah, you can go back. Okay. And the sidekick leaves. For example, in one meeting that I watched, an emotional speaker was cut off after 2 minutes, though the chair said that it was 3, but the next speaker spoke for over 4 minutes without getting cut off. I timed it. So maybe getting a timer with like a gentle cutoff sound like they use in the District 65 board meetings might help. And then as far as names and who's on the list, maybe we should write out our names phonetically so that we always know how to pronounce it. That's just something that seems to take up time.
Ms. Harned, 10
Is that
seconds.
it? All right.
No, 10
And that is
seconds.
all I have to say. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good night. I'm going to stay as long as my sidekick will allow me.
Next. Sheila?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Sheila Mary. I live in the 9th Ward, and I'm Executive Director of Evanston Cradle to Career. And before I get to what I really wanted to talk about, I can't let Alderman Rainey be quite as modest as she was about how she helped our advocate. She really went so far above and beyond. I can't begin to tell you how meaningful it was and how profoundly she has helped to change one of our residents' lives. So I just want to echo our appreciation for her efforts. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is how important we believe the Equity and Empowerment Commission is for the city and for our work, and how much we look forward to working collaboratively with the commission as it does its work. I think together we can have a profound impact on the inequity that has historically existed in our community. And I just wanted to say we really look forward to being a part of this positive effort to really change the way our community functions. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
Thank you. All right. Ray Friedman?
Good evening, members of Rules Committee. I'd like to address the Rules Committee tonight about civility. I'm not sure if this is a lack of communication or misunderstanding or just not working together towards a common goal and just being frustrated. I'm still trying to figure out what is our common goal. I appreciate the opportunity for public comment, but there are too many questions that go unanswered. I suggested 2 months ago that maybe we can have a committee to address and answer public comments. Can this be done? It is very frustrating for residents like myself and my neighbors who want to follow the process and the guidelines set up for the city and for all to follow and then get shut down or ignored, specifically the appeal 6-3-11 on 12/4/17, the Howe Project. Working together, we can move mountains. Working against each other just creates a lack of civility, hard feelings, and sets us up for failure. So let's start moving some mountains together.
Thank you. That concludes citizen comment. Next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes of the regular meeting of December 11th, 2017, and June 4th, 2018.
Second.
All those in favor? Alderman Rainey?
Alderman Fleming and I were discussing
Put your mic down.
the present, it's on, and I were discussing the inclusion of the city clerk's budget on our agenda. And so I'm reading the minutes from the previous meeting, and it says Alderman Rainey requested the city manager provide budgetary information for the next Rules Committee. Can anybody put that in context? Because I can't recall the nature of that request. And it's within the context.
I think the city manager can answer.
I hope
Yes,
so.
Mr. City Manager.
If I recall, and I'm looking quickly at the minutes myself, the issue regarding the city clerk and electing the city clerk had been on the agenda earlier. And I think that it came from that. There was not a desire to move forward with the discussion regarding the changing the clerk to an appointed position, but the request came in the context of that discussion.
Well, but what does that have anything to do with anything? The budget.
Alderman Rainey, you made the request.
I
I'm
know,
sorry.
but I didn't watch the video again. But it seems so out of context with the discussion about the city clerk, and the minutes don't reflect that there was absolutely no interest. In fact, there's a request in here for all sorts of, and I am discussing, by the way, the minutes before we move to approve them.
I understand that.
There was requests for various pieces of information that I did not find included for this meeting. So, and in fact, I contacted Alderman Nguyen, and part of my conversation was going to be that I would like the whole issue of the city clerk referendum postponed so that we could discuss putting that referendum on. I'm not sure when that election is going to be for school board members and park district members. I think March or April. Because we're not ready, and the League of Women Voters is doing a study, et cetera. And I thought that was the discussion we had, not so much that we weren't ever going to discuss it again at this meeting. And there's no indication in these minutes that we're not going to discuss it again. And I was surprised that it's not referred to in the agenda. Very surprised. I was not interested in taking a vote on it at this meeting, up or down, but I was interested in having an opportunity to discuss moving it forward for another meeting.
Alderman Rainey, yes, we had a conversation about 3 or 4 hours ago about this issue, and I think if you want to raise it for a subsequent Rules Committee meeting.
I'm going to, but that doesn't preclude the fact that I think it should have been on this agenda, and nobody, since it was I that made the referral to begin with, I think it would have been thoughtful for somebody to notify me that it wasn't going to be on the agenda. Just saying.
Alderman Braithwaite?
I'm going to let it pass.
No, just in an interest of time, I also agree that it's a weird place to discuss the city clerk's budget, so why don't we just strike, it is not an agenda item, so we can just
I just don't know why it's, yeah.
My
All right.
suggestion would be just to move forward without any additional comments on the issue until it's brought up again.
Well, right now, we're discussing the minutes.
Yeah, but she brought up the point, so I'm just responding
So
to
let's,
it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Go ahead.
Could we
call the
we're-
question on the minutes.
All right. Is there a second on calling the question?
Second.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The minutes are approved. Okay. Now we're going to move on with our agenda. We have the Equity and Empowerment Commission, of which I am also a member, here tonight to give us an update on the first year of work.
Oh, Alderman Nguyen, could I just point of order, Alderman Nguyen?
Yes.
May I just make a comment about, respond to citizen comment for a second? I just wanted to say that I don't believe that I allowed anyone at the last meeting, at the 23rd meeting, to cede time. And if I did, I don't remember it. And if I did, I will certainly apologize. But I don't believe that happened.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Great. Thank you. All right. Welcome,
Thank
former
you, Madam
Alderman
Chair,
Grover.
and Commissioner Nguyen. Jane Grover, I chair your Equity and Empowerment Commission. We have with us, two of our commissioners are not with us tonight, Julie Delar and Tim Eberhardt, but the rest of the commission is here. So I want to introduce you to our Vice Chair, Mario Vela, Dolores Holmes, Alejandra Ibanez, Kathy Lyons, Monte Dillard, and you know Melissa Wynn. So 7 of the 9 of us are here. So thank you very much for, first of all, creating the commission and then for appointing some extraordinary individuals to serve on the commission. We have, because we are all brand new to this, and you've appointed us all at once, we don't have staggered terms. We've spent the last few months doing some orientation to everything about the city, about legislative process. We have approved bylaws. We got a briefing on the Star Communities framework. We have talked with Erica Storley. She gave us a briefing on the structure of city government, chain of commands, departments, city council goals. Your Deputy City Attorney Mario Treto came to us and told us about the Municipal Ethics Code and FOIA and the Open Meetings Act. We've gotten a briefing on the budget process and this year's priority-based budgeting process that you're using. We've taken the show on the road, so we met the first few times in the Civic Center and realized right away that we needed to get into community. So we have had some really wonderful hosts for our meetings, our monthly meetings. We started out with Shorefront, and Dino Robinson gave us a briefing on the history of the African American community in Evanston. For context, in May we met with Center for Independent Futures to understand the disability community. In June, the Students Organized Against Racism at ETHS hosted our meeting, and we had a really terrific discussion with them. I encourage you to invite SOAR to one of your meetings or understand from them. Go to one of their conferences. There's a lot to be learned from SOAR. In July, we met with Connections for the Homeless and Joining Forces and understood the perspective of a homeless person in Evanston. And in the future, we will be meeting with in the YWCA, Second Baptist Church. We've had invitations from District 65, and we hope to meet at Fleetwood Jourdain. So it's been a busy schedule as we get oriented, as we try to get everybody on the same footing with the same understanding about governmental processes, what our mission is, and what we can do. So I'm going to turn it over to Mario to explain to you how we are building a plane as we're flying on developing an equity framework.
Good evening. A pleasure to be here. So I want to discuss a little bit of our commission plan, and this is an adoption of an equity framework. So the commission has agreed to prioritize a racial equity and adopt a racial equity framework. Throughout the visits that we've had within the city and with our community partners, we felt that this would allow us to see some of the disparities that our community faces. And we're also recommending that there's an internal focus on equity. That way we can understand the city's processes, services, investments, and programs first before we're out in the community. So it gives us an opportunity to step back, look at how we're structured within, and then we can go out to the community. In terms of this approach, this is a starting off point. What we're looking to adopt is an Evanston-specific equity framework and a lens to incorporate equity within the organization. And we want to model this after the Annie E. Casey Foundation's evidence-based equity framework, which is included in your packet. This is a simple 7-step, yet straightforward and clear approach. The framework will be revised and adapted for our purposes and priorities, and the commission plans to recommend this equity framework for adoption by the City Council. So this is a preview for that. As the City of Evanston develops, we also want to consider other ways to highlight the role of equity and empowerment within the organization, namely to change Pat's title from simple coordinator to chief equity officer. This would put her office and mission at the same level as her peers and in municipal equity field.
So that's where we are right now. We are reporting back to you, the Rules Committee, because I think this is where it all began. In the future, we expect to be regularly reporting to the Human Services Committee. And we're hoping that the Commission will, at its next meeting, consider some very specific retooled equity framework based on the Annie E. Casey framework that we hope to craft one just for Evanston, reflecting our priorities and our values. And we hope to submit that through the Human Services Committee for your approval ultimately, to apply to city processes and operations. Any questions that we can answer? I'm going to send questions to Mario.
I'm ready.
Any questions? Alderman Fleming?
Hi. I have several. I'll try to condense them. So my first input is, someone said that they hope to make this an internal focus. And I guess my understanding, I was not on council when the position was crafted, was that it is internal focus. I mean, I don't see this position as one that needs to be in the community assessing equity
We
amongst
quickly
others.
realized, I'm sorry to interrupt. but-
That's okay. So I don't know. Again, I wasn't here when they crafted it, but my understanding all along was that it should only be internal. There are other people to do outside work.
Pat's good work basically became outwardly facing. And so she was spending, we saw that there was value in her spending some time in the community, but that was actually overtaking what her role was and taking her out from her work internally.
So hopefully, Dr. Ephraim reports to the city manager, so hopefully he can make that correction with her as an employee. My other question, and I had asked for this before, was I know that we were given some kind of timeline for when you all, I think as you guys were getting started, Dr. Ephraim gave a timeline of when kind of work would be getting started. So if I can have that answered, that would be great.
And Alderman Fleming, we have copies of that. Pat, why don't you, if you could just hand those out?
Okay, so if you can pass that out, then I'll look at that. So I'll go to my next question. So I'm looking at this framework. I appreciate the work of the Casey Foundation. However, this continues to be my concern. The Casey Foundation, is applicable, but does not totally focus on a government institution. So in looking at this earlier, I realized that the guide was made by Terry Keeler, who actually works for Race Forward, that actually governs the Government Alliance for Racial Equity, that actually focuses on municipalities that work with, that are focusing on racial equity. And I've said this several times, I'm not really sure why we are not, as a government agency, working with an entity that only works with government agencies. They have a different way of looking at equity and what they're looking for in outcomes and decisions versus a nonprofit who might look at who we're serving and, where money goes. And Terry actually is a colleague of mine. He just works down the street. He lives in Oak Park. He's working with the mayor of Oak Park and the council there to look at racial equity. So I would hope that, I guess my suggestion would be before we go too far with this framework, that we might look at some other ones that actually just focus on government entities. I also would hope that, I know budget numbers are tight for us, but I would hope that there is some kind of really meaningful training that the commissioners are going through, because you all are being asked, you're being charged with a very big task here, and unless you have done, you kind of made a framework or toolkit for a government agency, I just don't want us to go too far down the road and realize we missed a couple of things just because as a council we didn't set you guys up for success with the proper training.
So 2 points here is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a starting off point in terms of how we're establishing our processes in the framework. So very, very open to hearing your feedback and in terms of government. And the second is the cost associated to this. Right now it is training. So that would be the primary cost at that point.
So you are planning on, can you just elaborate? I guess I wasn't asking what the cost was as much as I was hoping that we could find a way to have some effective training before you all go out as a group and make a framework or a toolkit. That's okay. That you haven't done before, that we make sure you're equipped on how to do that.
It's a group of extraordinary individuals that you appointed to serve on the commission, but we don't all have background in equity, diversity, and inclusiveness. So we have, all of us, gone through some part of training in various places, but we haven't done comprehensive training. And we hope that by working through development of an equity framework for the city, that we will ourselves get more familiar with that context. The training that's been made available to city employees, Dr. Ephraim has also made it available to the commissioners to participate.
So is that the Beyond Diversity training?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
Dr. Ephraim.
Dr. Ephraim, Equity Empowerment Coordinator. Yes, that is correct. So we have had the Beyond Diversity, we've had white privilege, we've had several of those. In addition, I'd like to point out, and I put a little bit in your packet about the bios, is that the commissioners, a vast majority of them, come with equity experience based on their work and have a great deal of equity experience. If I could also comment, one of the reasons that we look very strongly across all of these frameworks, and this one was particularly particularly interesting to us because not only do they work, you're right, they don't work just with government, but they have worked intentionally to be the organization to see that local organizations, including local government, were all doing this work, and they set out to put a guide in place for any organization, and they have worked with, as you said, with Race Forward and Policy Link, all places that we have connected with and have been in some attendance at their conferences with.
Nothing further from me.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do we have, oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up on the questions and first say thank you very much. I really enjoy that quote. What did you say? Building and flying the plane at the same time.
Sure feels like it. Yeah.
And I think all of us behind the dais understand the tremendous amount of work that you're taking on. I mean, you're looking to reverse what we would probably simply label as years and years of racism piled with some other isms. And so I guess I'll speak for myself. I don't expect a quick fix. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the mayor's selection and who he chose to represent this big issue. And so we have 3 aldermen, 2 of who I continue to serve with Alderman Nguyen, and I've had the privilege of serving with Alderman Grover and Alderman Holmes, who I would say have been advocates for justice for the time that I've had an opportunity to work with you. And also have a tremendous amount of respect for Reverend Monty Dillard, who not only is a huge pillar in our black community, but you also, within the context of the faith community, you work very closely with the other faith-based organizations in town. So that's something important that I think that we need to call out. In addition, Ms. Lyons, in your years of service with the Moran Center. And if I've forgotten anyone, that just means that I haven't had an opportunity to work closely with you. But thank you, Mayor, for the team that you've put together. What I understand, and I think we covered this in our first meeting, Dr. Effiam, and these are my words summarizing, you broke it down into phase 1 and phase 2. I think your task, as great as it is, it was really, you were answering the question of if we're going to best deliver our city services, if that's what you're charged with, then I think my summary of your words is we have to look internally. And so there's a timeline somewhere in there that explains how we're going to do that. And after we figure out that piece, then we can look outwardly and talk about how we deliver our services in the community. I am in favor of changing the title if the committee feels that makes sense. And I'm really excited about the fact that not only, under Wally's leadership, we have a position, but there's also a position that was recently created at Northwestern and also District 65. And I know that District 202 is contracting someone to do that work. So I'm speaking in favor. I know that it comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of criticism. And just thankfully with the team that's put together, I'm hopeful for the path that they're going to lay down. So thank you all for your work.
Thank you. And thank you all. Do we have any?
Just, if I may, Madam Chair, members of the committee, this issue of internal versus external is a really interesting one, and I think it's worth another moment to talk about. I think when Dr. Effiam was hired, this was new. I think we were creating a framework that was different. Other communities around America, other local governments have taken this on, and they have gone down very similar paths. And I think it was very clear early on that Evanston was a different path, and that we did not want to necessarily replicate what other local governments have done, because, quite honestly, we don't do that for anything else in Evanston. Why would equity and empowerment be any different? And because we took a different approach, Dr. Effiam, I think, was approached by people from all over, not only all over Evanston, but really all over the country. And I think it just became overwhelming. And I think, as you know, many of you know, Dr. Effiam she's a nice person, and if someone calls and wants her assistance or wants her to help with a panel or speak somewhere, she's very willing to do that. And I think really it became overwhelming because she is a voice nationally among local governments that's a different voice, and I think that many of our colleague communities around America have really sought her out. So I've encouraged her to politely decline some of these things. I know she's speaking. ICMA, the International City Managers Association, really wants to take a leadership role in this area, and that's one exception I have allowed her to make, and she's the main equity speaker at the ICMA annual conference in Baltimore coming up in September. But really short of that, we want to focus internally. We want to focus on the equity lens. Lots of important key issues happening here. So I don't know that we started out internal versus external. I think that the quality of Dr. Effiam and the message that she was sending really caused us caused her to do a lot more external. But clearly, internal is where we need to be, and we're going to continue to focus on that. And in addition to the commission coming and reporting to Human Services, I know we want to talk about the training that we will plan to launch in the fall, so that every member of city staff goes through the same type of equity training over a 2-year period. And so we'll be coming back. So I think it's important, Madam Chair, to recognize Dr. Effiam's good works, recognize that we need to be a little selfish and have her focus on our organization and politely decline some of the other requests for her work and helping other local governments around America sort out these difficult issues.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming, did you have your light?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one more suggestion, which probably Dr. Ephraim knows about already, but for more technical support and working with municipalities, the National League of Cities, which we are a member of, has an entire office, of which I'm a commissioner, steering committee member, or whatever it's called. But they also, so they do a lot of technical support. Again, I continue to hone in on working with city governments, because as I go to many trainings, they all pretty much concur that city governments are very different than other entities. And so there are a lot of things that nonprofits can do, kind of overnight or very quickly, that city governments can't do. So I just want to keep cautioning that it's very important that we look at equity in city or some kind of government entity, because many agencies are doing it and it's very slow and cumbersome work, but I just don't want us to go down the road of somewhere that's not going to get us where we're trying to be in the end.
All right.
I want to introduce very briefly Dolores Holmes for a follow-up.
I'm sorry, I just can't sit still any longer. Good evening. Since I was a part of this group where we were deciding about this position, and way before equity became the key word for everyone to say, I want to take the last 2 councils back when we started to, under Mayor Tisdall, if you remember, we started to try and do topics within this community.
Yes.
And I'm bringing this back to Alderman Fleming and looking at the Casey Foundation. If the first step is choosing a common language, if you remember, that was the first session that we had. So Evanston is always ahead of everything. We were ahead of ourselves even when we didn't know we were ahead of ourselves in terms of doing this. And I also want to say that no matter what we do in this city, in this country, starts at the top. So yes, we're to the training, but we also want the council members to do some of this training as well, so that you can be very much aware of where all of this is going. It won't do any good if it's just coming from the commission. City manager will certainly make sure, I'm sure, that the staff does it, but it also is going to involve council members making that sacrifice as well. So I just want to say that.
Thank you, Alderman Holmes. I completely agree with you, having been through Beyond Diversity with several other members of the council. It's critically important. All right, thank you very much. And we are now going to move on to translation services for fiscal year 19.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, in the staff report that you have, really raises some issues that we find that we're not able to address regarding the increased need for translation services, especially for community meetings. The memorandum goes into, I think, in some detail, some of the costs associated with this. I think our policy up till now has been to try to accommodate any request that seems reasonable. As you can see, some of the requests are starting to cost more money than we currently have budgeted. So we're looking to the committee for some direction as to what a good policy would be. I mean, one option would be to take this and refer it back to the Equity and Empowerment Commission and ask them to look at it and make some recommendations to us. We again try to look at best practices of other organizations, and quite honestly, they're all over the place. So once again, I think we're going to need to find what makes sense for Evanston. So, Madam Chair, we're happy to answer any questions, but really we're looking for some direction this evening as to what the committee thinks is the best process to evaluate this in order to budget appropriately for 2019.
Alderman Wilson.
Okay, as the item right after the Equity and Empowerment Commission, I think that would probably be a good starting point to figure out. Right. I mean, I realize it was put on the T for me, so I don't really have to be brilliant addition to the dialogue, but yeah.
So you recommend that we do that and send it back to the commission? Okay. So, Madam Chair, if that's all right, I guess I would ask that the recommendation be that the commission address this soon. We would need, I think, to know really in the September timeframe what a process would be so that we could incorporate that into the budget. Dr. Ephraim, I don't know how realistic that is.
Right.
I mean, you've laid out most of the issues here, so I think it's really just a discussion of the commission then to make some recommendations. The Rules Committee would meet again in, I guess it is in October, so we either could bring it back or we could, Madam Chair, send it back to Rules. Not something we've dealt with previously, so again, part of this is just to come up with a path that the committee's comfortable with.
Yeah, I think, I just want to add to what I'd say. My expectation would be that the budget information, the cost, all of that material be provided to them for that conversation. Obviously, in a perfect world, just translate everything, but they need to have a good grip on, what the practical realities are. And I think rather than come back to rules, it's just, ends up in as a budget line item. As we get into the budget.
With a policy that would travel. Because I think with this budget, unlike maybe some previous years, there are going to be some policies that we're going to ask the council to consider. Travel and training, I know absolutely is going to be review some changes of policy there. So if that's the will of the committee, we'll just ask the commission to put it on their list and come back, have it processed prior to the first part of October.
Does that work? But I do agree with Alderman Wilson that the commission needs to be supplied with the data to analyze. That can't be a task of the commission to gather all that data. Okay. All right.
And Madam Chair, members of the committee, then I guess I would just like to say that we will, at this point, just do our best. We'll deal with each individual request. We've had requests for simultaneous translation at ward meetings, which is very difficult to do. We've had, I think, as the memo talks about, the sort of the state of the art here is very electronic based, where a translator is literally somewhere else, not in the room at the meeting, but is connected electronically, and those costs, $900 for 1 hour translation. So. We're not going to be able to do that. We do not have staff designated to do simultaneous translation. That's a skill that I don't believe any of our staff members have. I think we have been fortunate to rely on the kindness of community members from time to time to provide simultaneous translation as the need arises. I think it was the question was the Dodge Avenue bike. Was it not bike? Bus stop meeting, and there was a request that we have that, and I think we had a community member. Stop me when I'm wrong, Pat. A community member that was available to do some non-professional but colloquial simultaneous translation. Is that how it all ended up?
That is how that ended up. And just if I can, a point of clarity, and I've spoken with Mario Trito as well, is that we do have to be careful when you come to simultaneous translation. It's very different to be bilingual and a translator. The language is very different. The complexities of the language are very different. And if we were to get into any issues that had some lots of technical language, legal language, or even any financial ramifications, if you were translating for someone about a ticket and you got something wrong and they misunderstood that and they end up having to pay the ticket or a fine, we could be responsible. So there are some complexities to this. We've been working on this for about 6 months in terms of how do we go and where do we go. But yes, that is the issue.
Thank you. All right, I have Alderman Fleming and Alderman Rainey.
So real quick, I think it lays it out in here, but my only concern is what is here that I hope we focus on. If we do translate the material, that there's someone who speaks Spanish at the meeting. I know I have some residents in my ward who, frequently come to meetings or offer to speak to people who, have limited English learning. But in my ward, I also have, I think, about now 80 people on a Spanish newsletter who signed up for a Spanish newsletter, and I think it is my responsibility to communicate with all of my constituents, not just the ones who can speak English or can bring a child with them who can translate for them. So I think as we definitely talk about equity, and we had the signs, everyone's welcome, printed up in several different languages, well, you can only be so welcome if you can't understand what's happening. And I know I've even thought about that as I've had a Spanish speaker approach me, and my husband's bilingual, and talk about wanting to come give public comment, but she doesn't know how to read the material, and there's nobody here who speaks Spanish when she wants to come to city council meeting. So, I think it's a real miss for us. So I guess my thing is, as we do this, that we would make sure that if we're going to have a policy, it's very clear as to what things are translated. If it has to be an all-city meeting or whatever it is, because, things that I have in my ward are smaller, and so they're not necessarily going to fall. I don't want to take budget money away from a bigger meeting, but I think we have to have some clarity so it doesn't feel like a hit or miss as to who gets chosen to have translation services and who doesn't.
Yeah. Alderman Rainey?
Yes, I've been at several PTA presentations where there are simultaneous translations going on with headphones. So obviously District 65 has that capability, and it would seem to me we would get in touch with them and find out what their services are, I would think. But as an aside, and I am familiar with two people who are very professional translators who have expressed to me that they are very appalled at some of our translations, just saying.
Okay.
I am so terrible at foreign language. I would have no idea what they're talking about, but they're not happy. So
All right. Well noted,
to be
Alderman
careful.
Rainey. Okay.
And Madam Chair, members of the committee, Alderman Rainey, and I think that's one of the reasons we're here. We don't want people to be appalled.
And they're going to be thrilled that we're having this discussion.
And we have for a long time relied on staff members who perhaps have conversational Spanish, who have had other duties, who then get pulled into this translation work, which they happily do to the best of their ability.
And I've been very defensive.
And so that's the challenge, and I think where we are in the world today, and the desires of many of you here on the dais and community members to do a better job, we just needed to share this information with you, and to be quite honest, that it's going to be a significant cost to do it right. Mm-hmm. And so we'll take this direction, ask the commission for some assistance. We've already begun costing out, staff versus contractors. We've reached out to some communities. The city of Anaheim, California, has translated the same budget tool that we're using, and they, I think, have a community with far more Spanish speakers than we do, and the bar for them is lower for translation, I think, than it is for us. And so again, every community is different, and the bar is higher here, and we need to just budget that, and we'll do the best we can through the remainder of the fiscal year until the council makes the budget decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to be a little bit mindful of our time here, but obviously this is a big agenda. The next, I'm going to condense the next two items, 6 and 7, because I was the one who asked the city manager to put them both on the Rules Committee. And if you all don't mind, I'm going to just discuss a little bit about this Wall Street Journal article that actually Wally sent to us, and actually I've heard about it from several other people in the larger community, about declining political civility. And the great irony is that Duluth tackled Duluth, Minnesota, and if any of you know anything about Minnesota, it's Minnesota nice. And what that means is you really can't get an opinion from people in Minnesota about anything because they just think everything is nice. I say that because I have family who live north of Duluth. But I think it was very interesting to read this article about what Duluth did actually 15 years ago to deal with a crisis that they were having in political civility in their community at a time of terrible economic decline there. Since then, Duluth has had something of a comeback, but they were getting population shrinkage, and they had tremendous loss of jobs and really had a lot of economic stress going on. So I liked what the Duluth did. I mean, they really engaged the entire community in terms of recognizing that the conversations that they were having amongst their government entities and their school districts and their population, their residents, had really become really rancorous and non-productive. I think all of us who have been to meetings in the last 6, 8, 10 months, a year, have recognized that I think for whatever reasons, and there are a number of them out there that we all can point to, I think our political discussion has moved from Evanston vigorous, passionate, to a little bit of Evanston rancorous. And I think everyone pays a price for that, and the work that we do pays a price. And I don't know that we're being as true to our true Evanston selves in believing in public debate and lots of vigorous discourse. So I asked the city manager to put this on because I think it's really important for us to keep talking about it. They aren't just words, but I do think that the more we consciously talk about these things and raise them to each other, the more we can permeate this into all of our discourse. Briefly, Alderman Grover and I were discussing the Evanston Community Foundation, perhaps picking this up, something where I'd like to have this continue to sit on our agenda for us to talk about. I know that District 65 has changed the climate in District 65 with what Ms. Harnett was referring to earlier, the 4 keys that they use now to help change behavior and get past some of the difficulties. So I think that this is something that I would like us to talk about. I know that all of us have been concerned about some of the rancor and the community, I'll say disillusionment, our own disillusionment, and that our concern that we really need to be return to our old passionate selves and less of our angry selves in order to get things done. So that was a speech, but sorry for the long speech, but I've been thinking about this a lot. Any thoughts from everyone? From anyone? Alderman Wilson?
It's a difficult conversation to have. And first off, let me just start by saying I think everyone sitting up here recognizes that the vast majority of the people in the community aren't uncivil and aren't disrespectful. Mm-hmm. I think that when someone is frustrated, they adopt a narrative that they think will be successful in achieving their goal. And I think that what we've seen in the broader community as a country is that there's a different playbook available. And sometimes that level of frustration rises to the point where, okay, I see that this playbook has been successful in getting, X result, and I'm going to try to adopt that playbook. I had always kind of thought that Evanston wasn't like that. And I kind of tried to maintain that idea that Evanston has these ideas. We are about community. We're about building a strong community. We're about communicating. There's been a pretty good bit of disappointment to see that it's not always that way. And I've been doing this for 9 years. You've been doing it for longer than that. Certainly in my 9 years, the past year exceeds the prior 8 by multiples as far as the kinds of things that people are willing to say to my face at a train station, standing outside in the hallway, screaming, literally, profanity, personal insults, things in front of my children. That's just not okay. It might not be illegal, and I get people like, that's not illegal, it's free speech. Okay, that's fine. But if you want any decent, normal human being to want to do the job that we're up here doing, if that's how you're going to get treated, you're not going to get any decent, normal human being who's willing to do the job. So we all work really hard. We don't always agree on everything. In fact, often we disagree. But at the end of the day, something gets voted on, we go to the next thing, because that's our job. I try to stay off social media, but I know that there are things about, comments, the council's exhausted. It's not fair that they're exhausted. They shouldn't be exhausted about this, that, or the other issue. We might be exhausted, but we are not taking it out at the vote. We come up here and we vote and we do what we think is right. And even though I'm exhausted, I'm not going to change my vote because I'm frustrated that somebody yelled at me at the train station. Not going to do it. Never going to happen. And I think that same thing applies for all of us. It's okay for us to express our frustration to our friends or to other people, but at the end of the day, we're up here doing the job that we're supposed to do. But it's not, in my opinion, it's not okay for an Evanston standard to have people come to comment. Again, it might be legal, it might not be against the law. I get that. I'm a lawyer. But I don't feel like it's okay for people to come up and make personal attacks. I don't think it's nice to hold up unflattering pictures. I don't think it's nice to utilize tactics and methods that people know are going to hurt someone's feelings when they have absolutely nothing to do with the issue itself. And if we can get away from that handful of little, things that happen, but happen loudly and hurtfully and painfully, I think that we can enhance the community conversation. We can get back to having difficult discussions, because some of the discussions are very difficult and challenging. But we can overcome that. And again, I forget who said it, but somebody said we can work together and accomplish a lot. Yeah, we can, and we do. We just heard about the Equity Empowerment Commission. We do affordable housing work. We do so many amazing things that we don't have to do, that people in the community don't even realize we're doing. And that's, I think, where much more of the focus needs to go. All right, that's my speech.
Yes. All right. Alderman Fisk.
Well, thank you, Alderman Wayne and Alderman Wilson, for your comments. I think they were really important. I also want to thank Bill Smith for putting up on the Evanston Now website the short video from Duluth. I was hoping we could listen to that tonight, but obviously we're running out of time. But I wish everybody on the council would take a look at that, because I think it's really important to get sort of an objective outside view of a community that really has been working on this issue for a long time. And in many ways, it's similar to Evanston. So to my colleagues, please take a look at that. It's, I think, only like I said, 7 minutes. So the other thing that worries me, and I've mentioned this at council before about the quality of the dialogue we're having in the community, is that it not only affects the community and affects us, but it affects our staff. And I've been really concerned with how that reaches down into the organization and has a very debilitating, almost toxic effect on the workplace. We depend on our staff to do an extraordinary amount of work and outreach and service to the community. And to do that and do it effectively, you have to have a really positive attitude. You have to renew yourself on a daily, if not hourly basis in order to do that and do the job that we're asking them to do. So I think it's just extremely important that we spend some time doing this and taking a look at what we can do to improve the dialogue in the community. So at my first ward meeting is coming up in September, and this is going to be one of the topics on our agenda. I'll let you know how that goes. But I'm hoping that we can get some buy-in from the community and work toward what I think is really rebuilding the kind of dialogue that we've been so proud of in the past. I don't know what the answer is regarding social media. As far as I know, I'm off Facebook, but somehow it never dies. So it's not something that I follow. I do get a lot of reports about what's appearing in Facebook. I think everybody kind of needs to understand that we're in sort of uncharted territory here. And that maybe a casual remark made in the wee morning hours on Facebook is going to have the kind of rebound that maybe no one anticipated. It does all reflect on our community and does all reflect much deeper than just us. So if anyone has a problem with anything that I've done, please, as usual, come to me. But I'm happy that we're having this discussion, happy that we're going to move forward with something.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know we have to move on, but I'm just going to read the 9 principles from Duluth's Speak Your Piece program, and then I think we should move on, but I will continue to raise this issue. They are pay attention, listen, be inclusive, don't gossip. Now, remember, this was from 15 years ago, so I think that might be don't post on Facebook. Show respect, be agreeable, apologize, give constructive criticism, take responsibility. So I think we all should just review all of those things as we come to every meeting. So, thank you. So next is item 8, amend City Council rules to prohibit ceding of time during public comment unless an exception is granted by the mayor. Okay. Mayor Haggerty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to start off this conversation because we've had several people come up from the public when I've been presiding over this and saying, oh, you're not following the rules, we're allowed to cede time. And maybe perhaps after our legal counsel can just to speak, because I've gone to legal counsel and I said, okay, help me with the rules, new mayor here, everything else. Do the rules say anything about ceding time? And the bottom line is I've been told that they don't speak to it at all. And so there seems to certainly be confusion out there because I have, as a matter of practice, said, listen, you can't cede time. Yet, I think as a matter of practice has been done. There's been a couple times when it has been ceded. And honestly, my thinking and the reason that I did that is we have a limited amount of time for public comment, 45 minutes. We take the total number of speakers, divide it by there. And I don't want people to game the system, okay? So if there's a hot issue, I certainly don't want 30 people coming up and saying, sign up, sign up, sign up, and then we're all going to cede our time to, Mary or Joe. And so that's been one thought that's been in my mind. The second thought is that there are many different mediums in which you can communicate with your alderman, right? I mean, you can call, you can send emails. We've had people come up here and give documents to the clerk to distribute. So, that's in my mind as well. So I just really wanted to have a conversation amongst the council up here to get other people to chime in on this, because I certainly want to be cognizant of our rule and make sure that I'm properly applying it as the presider of these meetings. And if it is, a general consensus, no, we should allow people to cede time, then we will. But right now, my understanding is the rules do not speak to that. Could I just confirm that with the city attorney?
Yes. Good evening, Michelle Mason Cup, Corporation Counsel. City Council Rules 6.2 is silent on this issue. It does not permit the ability to cede time.
And so when something doesn't specifically call out one way or the other, my understanding as the presider is that whoever the mayor is, or the mayor pro tem at that meeting, gets to
They had the
make the call.
discretion. And in fact, 6.2 indicates a speaker may address the council for no more than 3 minutes. It doesn't indicate that a speaker can be allotted additional time. It says they get a max of 3 minutes. So we always interpreted that to mean that no time can be ceded.
Okay. The only other point I'd like to make, which is, we have really engaged people. We all know that. Residents here in Evanston, they want to have opportunities, certainly, to be heard. We also have processes for all the decisions that we make here, going from sometimes boards and commissions, then to subcommittees of the council, then to the council itself. So there are many different layers along the way in which your voice can be heard. But if we feel like there's still this feeling out there that we're not being heard, and sometimes I do think people confuse you're not listening to me with, no, I am listening to you, I just disagree with you. Sometimes I think that gets confused, because I do think people think, man, if you would just listen to me a little longer, you'd see my point of view, and then you'd vote the way that I want you to vote. So, but if there's a general feeling here that we don't have enough mediums for people to communicate, one thing we could think of as a council is, you'd have to figure out how to staff this, is just like they do up in Congress and Capitol Hill, is you can flip on C-SPAN and you can see somebody up there talking. Do you want to set a time and just say, okay, during the week there'll be one time for a 3-hour period, people can come forward. Maybe it's here, and just like C-SPAN, it's an empty chamber. None of your colleagues are up there listening to you, but it's an opportunity. Those public comments then could be televised. Those public comments could then be, attached as a link to the packet, and perhaps then the public could feel like, no, okay, I did get my opportunity, but of course, you don't have the whole council there. There's a lot of different ways you could cut and dice this, but I'll leave it at that.
Well, I think I like there are some value to that, Mayor Haggerty, but the C-SPAN is actually, it's members of Congress who are speaking to an empty chamber, and it's not necessarily the public.
Correct. This is a twist on that. Absolutely. I recognize that the public is not elected. I'm just thinking, again, if the public's saying, listen, you're not giving us enough outlets in which to communicate to you, perhaps that's another idea. But there's a whole different iterations you could do.
I think your point is one that we try to stress to people many, many times, is that everything that we receive is read by us. And I think all of us really appreciate a well-crafted argument that's provided in writing or by email, that we can have some time to contemplate and review, as opposed to the speed talking or speed comments. and that we do look at all of these documents that people hand to us all the time. And I appreciate them. Bring them home, I read them, or I read them ahead of time and refer to them. So I have several other speakers. Alderman Wilson, then Alderman Ravel, and then Alderman Fisk.
Thank you. About a year or so ago, I spoke at an event, and we were talking about, one of the things I was talking about was what I perceive to be effective advocacy. And I guess at the lowest end of the spectrum was the petition where somebody just clicks a button and it automatically sends a form email. That's sort of the least persuasive as far as I'm concerned. Phone calls, personal conversations, a handwritten letter, things like that are, to me, much more impactful because they tell me that somebody is actually interested in taking that time to take that step. At the same time, I feel the same way about, generally speaking, about public comment. If somebody's going to go to the trouble and sit through a lot of this stuff that maybe doesn't relate to their particular thing and is willing to sit here to have that opportunity to speak, that is important to me, and I value that a great deal. That said, and it might seem initially counterintuitive, but I view the idea of not allowing ceding the time to preserving that opportunity. Because, for example, as the mayor alluded to, it would be too easy to kind of adopt a policy that automatically allowed that. How would that be a problem? Let's say somebody has their friend come in, or a bunch of friends come in, 12 people sign up. Your speaking opportunity is proportionate to the number of people who sign up. So if we have, 40 people sign up, let's say 45 people sign up, but one person had 20 of their friends either submitted. I think we can do it. You can sign up online now, right, Clerk Reed?
No,
or that's being worked on?
No, we haven't decided that yet.
But that's something that's.
Hold on, Devon.
Well, the point being, at some point you might be able to sign up online. The technology is evolving. So the point of that is that if somebody gets their friend to sign up, then that proportionally impacts in a negative way all of the other people who've shown up. So one person gets 20 minutes and the other people only get a minute.
Right.
And I don't want to do that. The person who takes the time to show up should be treated equally, and I don't really want to kind of enable that kind of gaming of the system. Yeah, that's my main point. When we have other circumstances that are exceptions, I think one of the developments, maybe more than one of the developments, there were significant presentations that were, I guess, appropriate based on what the nature of the presentations were. So rather than giving the opposition, okay, a couple people can sign up, they were given an opportunity to actually make formal presentations. It's arranged ahead of time, and that gives it gives people an opportunity to fully vet their perspective if it's, thoughtful and planned out. So we have those opportunities that are available. The mayor did provide for that. So those things are routinely allowed. So I don't see this as a problem. I see this as a way of helping to preserve the
equal opportunity.
Equal access to the public comment.
Yeah. Alderman Ravel?
Well, since I don't believe we've seen examples yet of people trying to game the system and have 20 people sign up and then cede their time to a single speaker, I'm reluctant to have us go that route, because I think in my experience, what I've seen is the example of a group of citizens who have an issue that they want to be able to explain clearly to the council, and it's helpful for them to be able to craft their presentation if they can cede their time so one speaker gets to present all the information. And because when I first came on the council, I was told that we don't generally allow presentations from groups of citizens, so maybe we've been moving more in that direction. But initially, it seemed to me that it was the way citizens were encouraged to be able to craft and present, a coherent argument was because they were allowed to let one person make a presentation and have more than the 3 minutes. So I think we need to be able to have some mechanism to really allow for those kinds of thoughtful detailed presentations.
Let's see, Alderman Fisk, and then Alderman Braithwaite, and Alderman Fleming.
Well, Alderman Ravel, I think the way that's been handled in the past, as Alderman Nguyen said, is that normally a group of people who have an issue that they want to present will approach either the committee chair or their alderman and say that they have a presentation that they want to make, that they want to join together to do that. And that doesn't take away from anyone else's time or really impact very much the 45 minutes. So I would just encourage us to find a way to make that a more formal process that will help us better plan the time that is used. And I'm sorry, as a point of personal privilege, I've been thinking about Ms. Keenan's comments again and about the July 23rd meeting and seating time. And it was very clear to me at that meeting that because of the number of speakers, we were not going to be seating time. I was trying to follow the mayor's process that sitting in for him. The point is that everyone who spoke at that meeting, whether it was perceived as seating time or not, everyone's name was on the list of speakers. So if someone chose not to speak, they didn't have to speak. Someone else was called and their name was on the list. The only name that wasn't there was Ms. Keenan. So that was how that decision was made. And I'm mentioning that only because I heard that there was some reference that someone wanted to report that to the Illinois Attorney General, and I'm just want to make sure we have the record clear on that. We can certainly refer back to the sign-up sheets. But I think the system as it's working is trying to be as fair as possible. And going back to what Alderman Wilson said, the opportunity that people have, not only through emails, but the effective communication. I try to answer all of my emails. Some of these issues are so complicated, and some of the background material would just be so time-consuming. I always tell people to call me up. We can talk about it on the phone. That's not a way of trying to say I don't want to get on the record or anything like that. It's just that these are very big issues, very long history of them, and a conversation is always better so that questions can be answered in a timely manner. So that's just the way I approach things.
Before Alderman Braithwaite, I do think that to some extent, Alderman Ravel, some of the issue that you're raising has been handled before when an issue comes to a committee, and because the committees have a more informal discussion. And in the past, before every committee met here on the dais, when we were in the committee rooms, there really was much more of a give and take, and that between the citizens who came, and the committees, where there would be much more of a dialogue. So I think that has changed because we all have microphones now, and we all sit behind this big desk. But I think that. But I agree with Alderman Fisk that if there can be some mechanism where a group was able to come forward and say, we want to have an opportunity to present or say something, And, one aspect is always that, legal objectors who have particular standing under our zoning code and our plan, under our zoning code have certain rights in our ordinance, that they do have an opportunity to be heard before others are heard. So, all right, Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I read this, I had mixed feelings coming into this conversation, and after speaking to the mayor, I understand what he was looking to achieve, and that is basically a tool to be more effective with our 45 minutes. And the reason why I'm able to support this, and just like everyone else, I think in terms of how I engage my residents, I take the phone calls just like you do. Access to my email with the exception, and I think it's worth saying, whenever I get spammed, I don't read those emails because it takes away from my ability to respond to my other residents, and I think I'll just use this moment to say that's just rather frustrating. So when I get those, I typically will respond with like one word or one sentence. The other issue, and we're going to discuss this later on, I do take time to newsletters just like everyone else. I also host monthly ward meetings, and then for issues that are specific, I'll also host neighborhood meetings. And then my favorite meeting place is Valley Food. I seem to run into a lot of residents at Valley to the point where my kids will not go food shopping with me anymore. But, you know, I do take the public comment section very, very seriously. And the one frustrating part is I notice that there are what I would call frequent flyers who will take the time to sign up and speak and yell and sometimes be disrespectful, and then will walk through the door without waiting for the outcome of the meeting. And it's the combination of, you know, waiting and the chatter in between that stretches us beyond productive hours, and I know we're going to cover that at our next session. So, yes, I would be supportive. I think it's a good idea. I don't think we're saying we're going to do that for every single meeting, but for those long meetings when we do have a lot of people signed up, it does make sense to be able to invoke that rule. So I will be in support of it.
Alderman Fleming, and then Alderman Tufferton.
Yeah, real quick. So I don't support this. I understand what the mayor's trying to do. However, you know, I think public comment is what it is. And even though I don't want to hear 100 people tell me in 30 seconds that they support or don't support something, that is their right to do. Now, I could support, you know, if we say you can only cede your time so that one person only has, you know, 8 minutes or whatever concoction we came up with in terms of a number. I would support that just so we don't have one person speaking for the entire 40 minutes. But I do also agree with Alderman Ravel. I think we're kind of projecting a problem that we don't have. And while we could get there because we've had so many more speakers, I think with just some kind of control of our meeting, I speak at District 65 sometimes. They do have a buzzer. It's very pleasant. It goes off. You know, you're expected to stop speaking there. I think if we can just enforce the time a little bit more, and also that involves the residents understanding that when the buzzer goes off, we expect you to stop speaking so that someone else can speak, not so we don't have to hear you, but so someone else has an ample, you know, amount of time to speak also. I tell my residents and other people, this is not the most productive way for you to get your argument across because we are not having a dialogue with you. I know Ray has spoken a couple times about, you know, what happens when I give public comment, I don't hear anything. And it's just, as you see, not set up for that. And so I always tell people when they call me, you know, that's when we can have a dialogue, or at committee meetings. But city council, as you see, goes very late, and it's just not set up for us to, you know, respond to everything you say. It's not personal. But so I you know, I don't think 30 seconds of you telling me yes or no or something is the most productive for your argument. I do respect that that's the time you have, and if that's how you want to use it, then I'm not going to tell you that, you know, you can't give your 30 seconds to your neighbor. But again, I do think there's some kind of compromise that I'd be willing to make if we saw the trajectory going to where the mayor says, and everyone is ceding time, and everyone is ceding time. And then my last comment just is about the presentation. Since that was brought up, I would love for us to have kind of a more formal process for presentations. I haven't seen a lot, but I know Ms. Kelly was offered the opportunity to come give a presentation about her lobbying ordinance. And so I would just hope that there's something formal there so that if someone else comes and says, I want to give a presentation about my trash, you know, that it's formalized so we don't look like we're playing favorites. And I think that would be my other objection to the way this is written, is that seating time is prohibited unless the mayor grants it. I just think that puts us in kind of a gray area where people would say, well, that's the mayor's neighbor, or the mayor doesn't like me. You know, we would just leave ourselves open for people feeling like we're playing favorites, and I don't want to open up that box any more than we have to.
Alderman Tufferton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the question that we need to answer is what's the most effective use of the 45 minutes?
Yeah.
Because I don't know this for sure, but even if you had 15 speakers speaking 3 minutes exactly, it's still going to be more than 45 minutes.
It always is.
With everyone transitioning and the mayor calling them up. I think seating time, to Mr. Smith's point earlier, is probably a more efficient use than having everyone speak for a shorter period. It's the same thing we allow people to do on the 4th of July. People put out chairs for a large area and then break them up for their friends. I think if people show up and establish that they're going to cede their time ahead of time, it'd be more efficient than the way that we do it, where it's kind of like an ad hoc. I'm not going to speak, but this person can have my time. I think to the agenda item 13, I mean, the critical thing is that we have it be 45 minutes, but I oppose a prohibition on seating time. I just think we should come up with a better and more organized way to do it. I also think, just in thinking about the past year and a half, like one of the more effective public comments was when the Women's Club came up all together, made a brief 30-second statement, and had everyone who was in agreement with it stand up. And I think we should encourage that type of comment because it's more effective and efficient. And I think a prohibition on seating time sends a bad message. I think we should try and figure out a better policy that keeps us within our timeline and respects the intention of citizen comment. So I'm going to vote no on any prohibition, but I'd like to continue to work on the issue.
Let's see. Mayor Haggerty.
I just would like to clarify, because I've heard it during public comment, I've heard it sort of implied from one of the aldermen up here. I am not proposing restricting, public comment, okay? This is not about the mayor deciding, oh, yeah, you can speak, but you can't speak, but you can speak. I've never done that, right? That's just absurd to even imply that, in my opinion, or to outright directly state it. What I am trying to do with this item that's on this agenda is really have the conversation that we're having right now, which is the rule is silent right now. So I'm conducting and presiding over public comment the way I am. And I'm not sure there's a huge issue. Other than some people saying, I wanted to cede my time and you wouldn't let me cede my time. It doesn't happen that often. And yeah, I'm sort of a risk management kind of guy, so I'm looking forward. I'm saying, geez, somebody could monopolize. You could. I mean, I could come in here on an issue and figure out a way to do that by putting half the people on here and then say to cede my time. Now, the way it is, what I was trying to do with putting it on here was just to clarify to people that, hey, the rule is specific that you can't cede time. Again, believing that there are other outlets to communicate to the council. So that was that's where I was going with this. In no way is this intended to limit anyone's ability to communicate directly to the council or come before, or to somehow empower the mayor to make decisions on who gets to speak to the council and who doesn't. I would never do that, and I never have done that.
May I make a clarification point, please, because I believe he was speaking to my statement. So I was speaking to, on the agenda, it says, amend council rules to prohibit of ceding time during public comment unless exception granted by mayor. So that's what I was speaking to. Not that you would just tell someone they can't speak, but the way it's written is that you would have the power to say if someone could cede their time or not. So I didn't want to get us down that road.
Which right now, unstated, is sort of the way it is, as I understand it.
I was just speaking to what was on the written agenda.
I understand, Alderman Fleming. The way, if you go back and look at the recording, I don't know, the way that it was implied a couple times in your statement implied that somehow the mayor would decide who gets to speak and who doesn't. At least that's how I interpreted that comment.
Alderman Wilson?
Okay, how about we take all that stuff and put it together into this? I was just going to make a suggestion.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to suggest, how about this? If you are present, you can cede your time to someone else, but there would be kind of maybe a maximum. I think Suffredin said, up to, I think the typical number of minutes is 3 minutes. So let's say, up to 9 minutes you could get. That way it's, and one would think, you probably can make any reasonable point in 9 minutes. So if you're present, you can cede your time to somebody else, and that person can have up to 9 minutes. There would potentially be these other exceptions that we make for the presentations and things like that, but that would make some sense to me. So if you're here, you can cede it. But again, I just don't want. It's not been a problem, but you wouldn't want somebody coming in and taking up 30 minutes of the public comment period.
Okay, Alderman Braithwaite, and then Mayor Haggerty, and then Alderman Fisk.
I guess I just want to re-clarify what I heard the mayor say, and I put it in my own words. It's just we're trying to manage 45-minute conversation with our public, and so I don't think we need to add more details to it. It's just acknowledging that if we have a long meeting with a lot of agenda items and a lot of people showing up, it just gives the mayor the flexibility to run a more efficient meeting. That's all I hear us doing. I don't think we need to over-legislate this and tie it up with additional rules. It's unclear the way the code is written, and he is just publicly stating that if we need to get through a long meeting, he has the ability to say, while presiding over the meetings, okay, we understand your point, all 45 people. We're not going to cede it and just move on. Maybe I'm overstepping what you're trying to achieve, but I think what you're saying makes sense to me, and I'm willing to support it without adding additional rules.
And that's what I'm doing right now. I mean, what you just described is what I'm doing right now. The question is, do you want to put it in the rules in writing or not put it in the rules in writing? That's really the question that's before the council.
For the few times that we have to do it, which isn't very often.
All right.
One other suggestion. I mean, look. If you wanted to keep it the way it is now, the way that I would propose, managing it is, I agree with Alderman Wilson that hey, it should be something. If you've come in here and signed up, then cede. But it would be to ask the city clerk, hey, add another column to the sign-in sheet that says, intend to cede time. And then just check it. And if I can see that, my God, 30 people are ceding time, I can use my good judgment and make a decision on the fly.
Yeah.
Clerk Reed, did you want to make a comment?
I would not mind doing that. I just do want to clarify that the council rules do currently say that someone can only speak for 3 minutes. And so a lot of the points that are saying someone could monopolize and take 20 minutes or 9 minutes, it's already addressed with the council rules, as Corporation Counsel clarified earlier. So someone can only speak for 3 minutes. Right. So I think it's kind of addressed already.
Well, I think the seating time point is that people would want to go beyond just one person's time.
They would start.
I think it's already addressed in the council rule that you can't speak for more than 3 minutes. So if someone, let's say that there are 60 people signed up and folks only had 30 seconds, you could cede your 30 seconds and that person couldn't exceed 3 minutes.
That's a great clarification.
Thank you.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because I would say we haven't really, I haven't, then shame on me, applied it that way. Because we've had cases where you had 3 minutes and, we've had people say, I want to see it, and I've given somebody 6-9 minutes up there.
Thumbs up to Devon. Right on.
I will say, having been a speaker,
better than 9 minutes.
I was going to say, having been a speaker at the city council, and also having been on the council when there was no time limit, and people would speak for 20 minutes, a single speaker. So you really can effectively get a lot across in 3 minutes, I think. So I think Clerk Reed is raising a good point that that's the limitation. So you can cede, but only up to 3 minutes. Alderman Suffredin?
I would just like to ask and make sure that we, along the lines of what Alderman Wilson said, in order to cede your time, you have to be present and affirmatively do it.
I would agree with that, definitely.
That's the way the rules are right now. So it's not like we'd be changing.
Right, but I mean, instead of, somebody signing up for a block, or a group of 5 people sign up for a block, 4 of them leave. Like, in order to give up your time, you need to be present.
Thank you for that clarification.
And say that I give my time to Devon Reed.
Yeah, that's not an option.
Yeah.
All right, so where are we here?
So, Madam Chair, I think the council needs to decide. I think Alderman Suffredin kind of outlined a procedure, so I think the council needs to decide, do you want to codify it in your rules, or will the mayor simply take that as sort of the understanding of the current council and we move forward?
I'm happy to take this conversation and apply it going forward as best that I can.
I would say, we want to make sure we let the public know, though, that
So perhaps we change the admonition on the public comment that appears on the agenda.
Right.
That's correct.
The maximum time any single speaker may speak is 3 minutes,
That's
even
a great idea.
with seated time.
That's a great idea.
So So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, we'll make that change on the agenda, and we'll work with the city clerk. Perhaps we can add that to the form, or there are already sheets out there on the table. Maybe it'd probably be a good opportunity to review what's posted anyway. So, because I think between the clerk's office and the manager's office, we'll figure it out.
Okay. Now, excellent discussion, everyone. So next is City Council schedule conflicts. We do need to get to this. City Manager Wood. Yes, I've just been pointed out that we were supposed to end at 7:30.
Oh, because of human services.
Yes. Okay. So let us at least do the things that we must do right now, which I think might be schedule conflicts. Is that right?
And yes, September 10th is Rosh Hashanah. The council has traditionally not met on Jewish holidays. What we would like to propose is the council be dark on September 10th, and that September 17th be treated as a second Monday, so that we would have Administration of Public Works and Planning and Development per that normal second Tuesday. So if that works for you, then we'll make that change.
All right. Do we all have agreement on that?
I agree.
Yep.
Right. Could just make a motion, please. All.
I move that we move the September 10th meeting to September 17th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
And then on some of the remainders, the consent calendar pilot, I guess I would just ask for general direction. Can we continue the pilot then at least till your next meeting in October? Which I'm not even sure at this point would take us through that. The electronic sign-in sheet, perhaps that could be at your October meeting.
Let's do that.
Discussion.
Then. Okay.
The city manager's evaluation.
May I suggest that any of those of us who served before on the prior committee who would like to serve again meet, and I'm willing to serve again. Alderman Ravel? Okay.
Okay. I move that we reappoint the prior committee. Which I'm not on.
Who are they?
All right.
The last ones were Alderman Ravel, Alderman Nguyen, and myself, the mayor.
So Alderman Fisk, and then Alderman Suffredin.
I just think it's a good idea to have new voices and a new. I'm trying to remember what exactly you did, and it's tabulating the responses.
Yeah.
Again, I think spreading it out. I've never served on the
Would
committee.
you like to?
I
cede my seat.
I think. Well, it's not that I'm looking for more work to do. I just think that people who have not served on the committee, who would like to serve on the committee, should have first choice. So
absolutely, I'm happy to not serve again on that. I mean, I don't mind doing it. I'm happy to. So, anyone?
I'm happy to cede. I've done it twice. And,
yes.
Yeah.
All right. Who would like to serve on the committee? Would anyone like to let me know? Well, Mayor Haggerty, and then
Suffredin.
I also volunteer.
And Fleming.
Okay. Alderman Fleming and Alderman Suffredin?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Do we need to do it all those?
Okay, so then we can let you know that the three of you should meet and then schedule a time for the evaluation. Obviously with the rest of the council and with the city manager.
Do we have a time frame, Alderman Wilson? I mean, when?
Well, we were supposed to have done it by now, correct?
Okay.
So, Mr. City Manager?
So can we set a timeline then? Maybe just an agreement?
I think that we should have the city I would recommend having the city manager. We're going to be in heavy-duty budget season.
Right. You're exactly correct.
But we should absolutely have to have it by the end of the year. So I would recommend by the end of October.
And, Madam Chair, members of the committee, there's been a form that's been used. Is the council satisfied with the form? If so, then Ms. Francello and I can work with the committee to get the form out over the next few weeks, and then once the committee, maybe the committee could meet to just come up with a time frame. Sure.
Can I make it? I've read those questions, and I think there are some questions that if you could send it out within the next couple of weeks, Dar, and then we can provide feedback to the committee in terms of making some tweaks to a few of those questions. There were some that were very confusing.
I was going to suggest that we distribute the form as soon as possible and then figure out a time to meet, since we're just talking about the framework, and then we can talk about the schedule once we have the form.
Right. Yeah.
So,
well, I think the form, we have modified the form slightly over time in response to Alderman answering the form and deciding whether things were relevant or not, and adding issues that we thought were important over time. Alderman Braithwaite, you're asking for the form to be distributed so that you can give feedback to the committee to change questions on the form?
Yes.
Okay. So, Ms. Francello, could you distribute?
So to the committee and not the whole council?
No, distribute it.
So I guess my formal request would be to take the current questionnaire, distribute it to council, and then have them send the questions back, and maybe one of you would like to be the point person and just collect all the feedback, and then as a committee, you all can decide how to manage that. I mean, my perfect example is I always think it's nice to be able to compare previous year. That would be one of the changes that I would like to see to the form. And I would like to be able to submit that to someone in the committee, and then you guys can take the other suggestions and figure out what you would like to incorporate into the document, the final document that's sent out by DAR. Does that make sense? Pretty simple.
Okay. Ms. Francello, do you? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So I think it's up to the committee to work with the city manager and the rest of the council to determine a time frame, a date for the city manager's evaluation.
Well, why don't we try and have the form input back from council members by Friday, next Friday? I mean, you're going to look at the questions and just say, I'd like to add or delete this question.
This coming Friday?
You tell me if that's realistic.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't take very long.
It shouldn't take very long.
For something that we've seen like for the last couple of years.
And I don't know, I'll work with the mayor and Alderman Fleming to find a time next week where we could meet.
That's a good idea.
And then from there, when would we want to have the response? I mean, we could set out, once we have the form, we could figure out the time frame.
Right.
Pretty short order after that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Can I just suggest I think we've done it before on like a Monday when we're all exhausted, and maybe picking another day that is not like a council meeting where we don't have a huge agenda.
Usually we do it on a non-council Monday.
We have done it on a non-council?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for remembering.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I think at this point we should, given the fact that Alderman Rainey had to leave already. Okay.
So maybe 8 and 9 could be at a future meeting.
Yes.
So I move that we continue the remaining agenda items to the next committee meeting.
15? Do you want to remove that?
I would like to move that we remove item number 15, the clerk budget spending.
Second. Chair, if before that vote's taken, there's information released, a memo put out for the Rules Committee about this. I think there should at least be some discussion, since there's a memo and documents put out relating to the budget that claim that we're.
As a point of information, so when the issue was brought up, Alderman Rainey she read through the minutes and she clarified that that was not her request. So since it wasn't her request, Clerk Whedon, typically we don't deal with budget matters within the Rules Committee. We deal with it within the context of the budget. It made sense for her to withdraw it from the Rules agenda. So we'll probably deal with the issue of your office within the context of the budget discussions, if that makes sense.
It does. I just want to, I just want to, for the record, say that my office wasn't consulted on this. I had no idea that this was going to be on the agenda for discussion. I discovered it this weekend when I went through the agenda, and I was looking for the referendum question that I thought would be on the agenda. And I do think that if, we're going to put something like an independent office's budget on the agenda, that there should have been some kind of consultation with the clerk's office before this was put into a memo.
And I think Alderman Rainey addressed that.
Yeah,
because it was her request, and she addressed as well. And I think her suggestion was that this is talked about later on. If it's going to be a referendum question, that would be in April at this point. So she suggested addressing it all, but she had the same comment you already made.
The referendum question be put on the October Rules Committee agenda.
Is that an action of the committee?
No, I don't think that's what. I don't remember her saying that, but I don't know. I just know she said she wanted to vote on it. We couldn't vote on it until April. It was too late to get it on the ballot.
Yeah.
For now, I don't know if she said October or not.
So
Wait, one at a time. What?
I just don't remember if she said October or not, so I didn't want to vote on
She
it.
said, well, she did say she wanted it later in the year, so we'll clarify with her whether she wants what Rules Committee meeting she'd like to have it on. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Do we have a motion with respect to adjournment?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
All in favor? Do we get everything?
Aye.
Okay. I'm just trying to.
we didn't vote on continuing the other agenda items.
Oh, I thought.
That's what I thought.
Except
Oh.
So I think it
And
was
staff has
direction.
general direction,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all.
What time
Good night,
will the
everyone.
Human Services
I
meet,
can't- I'm sorry.
Madam Chair? No break? Bathroom break?
Whenever the chair wants to call it.